Yeah, that's absolutely right. A minion with infinity attack. It's just dealing infinite damage right here. This is crazy. It's day 2 of the Across the Timeways card reveals. So we've got a handful of new cards to review, including a few new legendaries here, actually, from the neutral pool of cards. First and foremost of which is this absolutely insane infinite attack Murazond Unbounded. This is normally a 9 mana 8/8 dragon, but it has this battle cry. At the start of your next turn, set this minion's attack to infinity, because they're the infinite dragon flight or whatever. And I mean, like, clearly if that is played and sticks and is able to attack on the next turn, it's obviously a win condition, right? Like, yes, of course, there could be some taunts in the way and stuff, but presumably, if you're going to the trouble of getting an infinite attack minion down, then you're going to have some ways to push through some taunts, some silences, whatever, right? And then hit face for infinity damage to kill the opponent. Now, you know, that's easier said than done, right? This is literally just a 9 mana 8/8, 99% of the time, probably, right? Because if you spend an entire 9 mana playing this card, there is no world in which, you know, on turn 9 or whatever, an opponent simply cannot deal with this thing. You know, it's only 8 health. Any cheap removal spell, little minion trades on board, rush minions, whatever, right? There's so many ways to just deal with an 8/8 that, you know, costs 9 mana on turn 9. That's just not going to ever actually work, right? So to make this work, you're going to have to, like, cheat it somehow, right? You're either going to have to, you know, maybe cheat it into play early. You're going to have to sort of hide it or protect it in some way. Maybe that's like giving it stealth or can't be targeted, or hopefully hiding behind a wall of taunts or something against a minion-based deck, right? It's going to require some setup. Maybe that demands some mana cheat, whether that's like, you know, get up to 15 mana first and then, you know, play this alongside something else, some kind of card that gives it stealth or whatever. Or maybe mana cheat by reducing the cost. Like we already saw maybe Warlock with that like Divergence card or whatever, right? Maybe you just cut this card in half from a cost standpoint, and then, you know, maybe you have a 4 mana version you could play alongside some other things in order to give it that sort of survivability. Now, you know, a couple things to note, right? This is a battle cry, so it has to be played from hand. It can't be like cheated into play as one way to cheat it. For instance, you do need to actually play it from hand. Charge and that sort of stuff doesn't really necessarily help here, because, you know, it's at the start of that next turn that it's going to be activating. There might be some weirdness with like dormant and charge that is possible for this one, I guess, technically, but I don't know. In other words, it's just going to require a ton of work to make this work, and that's probably going to be the death knell for this card. Most likely that sort of juice is just not worth the squeeze, because if you're just putting in that much time and mana and work, it's going to be really, really hard to actually make this, you know, a valuable sort of thing to do. That said, when numbers get this big, literally the biggest number, I don't think it's actually infinite, by the way. I think, you know, there's like some integer limits and stuff in the code of Hearthstone or Unity or whatever. Whatever programming language that make it some obscenely large number that is functionally infinite for the purpose of the game, but not technically infinite. But they did actually add an infinity symbol recently, and people were wondering kind of why. Well, now we know why. They literally just added infinity symbol. It's going to be like a turned 8 basically there for Murazond. But, you know, there are things that scale with attack too, where like even if this doesn't connect face, if there's some way, I mean, if it's on board and it's on the next turn, it's probably going to be able to connect face. But, you know, I was thinking about like earthen scales or whatever, right? Like give a friendly minion +1/+1, then gain armor equal to its attack. You gain infinite armor. Or, you know, like Mage has the little frosty guys right now that gain armor based on attack as well. But note, it would still be an 8/8 on their turn. They'd have to let it live, you know, and then on your turn again, it becomes infinite, right? So it's not like you're going to be giving them infinite armor. You'll already be attacking with it by the time it's infinite, basically. So I don't know, man. Basically what I'm saying is like probably really never works, but like with numbers this big, there's always cheese stuff that might happen. Some weird, really specific combo. You know, we just saw actually, as far as stealth is concerned in Druid, right? Like Panther Mask. Get up to 13 mana on Druid with ramp, play Murazon and Panther Mask. It sets to 5/4, but you don't necessarily care because, you know, you're going to get infinite. The 4 health could matter against certain like AoEs and stuff, even through stealth. But, you know, like it's possible, right? I don't want to write it off. It's just, is it a better win condition than other things? Probably not most of the time, but man, I just don't want to write it off because crazy things can happen when you have crazy numbers. People are smart. Sometimes Blizzard overlooks things, and there's just possibilities here that exist that could maybe break this card. So is it good? No, not really. Could it occasionally break the game? Yes, absolutely. All right, so moving on over to our next legendary. Not quite as crazy, but still kind of doing some crazy stuff. This is Chrono Lord Dios, a 7 mana 4/8 with your battle cries, death rattles, hero power, and end of turn effects trigger twice. So that is basically a Bran Bronzebeard, a Baron Rivendare, a Drakari Enchanter, I think is that card that is your end of turn effects trigger twice, and I guess what, Sing Along Buddy as well from your hero powers trigger twice, right? That is 4 different cards that have all been stapled together into Chrono Lord Dios. And, you know, we did see like Bran's been really, really great in eras in the past. Sing Along Buddy has been broken in the past as well. You know, Baron's had a few moments, but never crazy broken. And, you know, I don't think Drakari Enchanter ever got too broken either. Mostly meme status, I think, most of the time. But essentially, you know, a few solid or good cards and, you know, a couple solid cards all stapled together. Effectively, I think like 13 mana worth of stuff boiled down to a 7 mana card. So you might be thinking like, my God, Regis, all of those incredible cards boiled into one. It must be nuts, right? No, I think it sucks. No, I think it's really bad because you're basically paying this mana premium for the versatility of this card, right? In essence, you're paying all of this extra mana at 7 in order to get multiple effects, right? But it's very, very hard to use multiple of those effects at once. You know, you want to have a cheap thing like Bran Bronzebeard that only costs 3 mana and then use that specifically for battle cries and do, you know, maybe one giant battle cry thing or multiple, you know, little battle cry things all at once. It's the fact that it's cheap that allows you to combo into some really powerful things with it, right? When you're paying an extra 4 mana, you've got to find a way to utilize multiple aspects of this, right? It's like, how often is a card or multiple cards even going to weave into a turn where you're using both the battle cries and the death rattles and the end of turns? It's just never really going to line up, right? Even if they literally printed cards with all 4 of these things, you're just talking about such a high premium to pay that it's going to be really, really hard to get that into play effectively. So like, you just never want to spend 7 mana on this. Like, yes, there are probably ways to discount this. You know, like we talked about before, you cut this cost in half. Like maybe you've got some more interesting stuff because you can make this 3 with Divergence and Warlock or whatever. But then you're probably just right back to Bran Bronzebeard or Baron Rivendare or whatever, right? And it's like, well, shoot, those still don't actually feel that crazy because, again, I don't need both of those effects usually. I'm going to ever only need one, maybe a little spare bonus effect here or there. But ultimately, the versatility is not really all that helpful in the average game state. You just want one thing and you want it to be as efficient as possible, and here you're really burdened with a lot of inefficiency in essence to get all this extra stuff that's probably just never really going to be useful. And you know, even if you have a deck that has all of these things in it, you know, of course everybody's got a hero power, maybe you got some battle cries and death rattles, it's still just 7 mana is such a high cost to pay for any given one of those at a given moment. So ultimately, I just don't think this is really going to matter much. I'm sure there will be moments this, you know, comes off an Aviana or whatever, and it's really cool that you've generated a 1 mana Dios and it's got some awesome plays. But as far as a card you're actually running in your deck, I think it's just too expensive and paying prices for its effects kind of in the wrong direction. All right, so moving on over to Chromie, the star of the expansion. Will this card be the star of the expansion as well? Spoiler alert, no, I don't think so. Chromie is a 6 mana 4/6 with death rattle. Draw another copy of cards you've played this game, which this wording is actually a little bit hard to parse through. I think actually the word copy in here in particular can be a little bit misleading, but in effect, right, let's say you've played perfectly on curve through the start of the game. You've played a card on turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, and turn 5. You slam Chromie on turn 6. Do note she's not a battle cry. This is a death rattle, which that's already a big point against this card. So often we want card draw to be faster in Hearthstone. So this is really just kind of a 6 mana play a 4/6, which feels a bit like a pass turn these days for a 6-mana turn. And then once this dies, if it doesn't get, God forbid, silence, or something unlikely, but once it dies, you get 5 cards drawn from your deck and added to your hand. Now, specifically, right, this doesn't say get a copy of the cards. If it said get a copy of the cards, she would be generating them and they would legitimately be new copies. This instead says draw another copy. So what that means is if the cards you played from turn 1 to turn 5, you have to have another copy of those in your deck because you ran, 2 of them in your deck. So you played the 1-drop on 1. If that other 1-drop is still in deck, you're going to draw that 1-drop. My reading is that if it's already been drawn in hand, there will be nothing to draw. I don't think it generates a new one. I think it has to draw it specifically from the deck. So there could be some moments you miss things because you already drew that secondary copy, right? But, in theory, this could be up to draw 10, right? Like you could just straight up draw 10 cards if you played this late enough in the game or whatever. And, it just helps you kind of thin out your deck, especially if you play this like on turn 6 or 5 or whatever, because, you've maybe played all the cheap stuff. You can generate more cheap stuff, which does help you get it into play faster. It leaves your deck at a higher quality because you pull out all the small stuff from your deck. But ultimately, you're not like getting extra copies of stuff as I read it. I really think that's a reading. I also was reading what other people said on Reddit and such. Seems to be the consensus on the wording on this one, which, it would actually be nice sometimes if you had like some awesome legendary you played on turn 3 and, if you played Chromie, let you get another new copy of that awesome legendary, but it doesn't look like that's the case because if it's a legendary, of course, there wouldn't be another one in your deck outside of some other weird like shuffling circumstances or something, which I guess is possible, but again, just crazy amounts of work for this payoff. So yes, like in some ways a card that, says draw up to 10 cards kind of sounds insane to me, but the price here at 6 mana is really slow. The death rattle's really slow and awkward. So, if you go into turn 10 and you need stuff to do, you're waiting a whole nother turn for your Chromie to pay off. There's also some hand size considerations. I think very often your hand's going to feel too full, especially if you get this too late in the game. Like, yeah, if you played on 5 or 6, exactly. But if you get on to turn 12 or something and you've played 10, 15 cards, right, you might actually just be destroying a large portion of your deck because your hand might not be empty enough. You only got 4 or 5 slots. You got 10 things, and she kind of becomes a dead card in a way because you don't necessarily want to fatigue yourself and burn half your resources. So I just think there's this really weirdly tight window for this card. I don't think the payoff is really all that fantastic compared to other just, we've got really efficient, really rapid card draw in Hearthstone these days. And like, yeah, this is still really, high output card draw, but it's expensive and slow, which I think is a hard time competing. So weirdly, I just don't really know who's going to make room for this. The death rattle synergies don't seem to help. If we're reading this right, and again, it seems to be the consensus, I just don't think this really gets there. I think if it said get a copy of the cards you played this game, you might be more willing to pay the low tempo cost here for a 6 mana 4/6 death rattle. But without that, I think it's going to be really, really tough to get this card into play at all. So next up here we have Sandmaw, which, man, it is really rare that we see just vanilla untexted cards in Hearthstone these days. Used to we would get like 1 or 2 a set, I feel like, but now it's been really, really rare. But here it is. The Sandmaw is a 3 mana 7/2 elemental beast. And normally I would just instantly write this card off. Easy 1-star. Like, no one will ever play a 7/2 in Hearthstone without text. Like, there's just no reason to play this. It dies instantly. There is one tiny consideration for this card that has me intrigued. I'm thinking about it, right? I'm curious. Is this the difference maker for the food chain? The hunter quest that requires you to play a 1/3/5 and 7 attack beast. That 7 attack slot in particular was always really tough for hunter. They only had that one guy that gets discounted off Kindred, the 7 attack rush guy. And it's like games where you hit that felt pretty good. Games where you didn't, it felt like you were just completely stranded. This does give you another beast in that 7 attack slot, which I'm certain this is why this was printed as well, right? Like they just clearly wanted to better support that quest there. Would have been kind of cool for something like in the mini set even maybe, but regardless. So is it enough? Does that get Quest Hunter over the line? I don't think so. I think it's still not enough. Like, it's nice. I think you could see some experimentation with it, but I think that deck hits like tier 3 at best right now, right? It's just like not good enough comparative to other things, and like if this was a good card and 7 attack, like, okay, you'd be really nice. But it's almost like you have to run kind of a bad card because you just don't normally want to play this to make the quest slightly better. And it's like, that's not really going to be the thing for success, right? You have to have a good card that makes the quest better because you don't want to stuff your deck with bad cards for what appears to be kind of a mediocre quest result anyway. So still not good, but I'm going to give this 2 stars basically instead of 1 just because of that hookup with the Hunter quest. Moving on here to the Clockwork Rager. I always love seeing some new Ragers. This one looks pretty cool. He is a 5 mana, 5/1 mech with Battlecry. Gain +1 health for each turn you've taken this game. So, if you play this on turn 5, I guess it's probably going to be a 5/5. I don't know if it counts the turn 5 you're on. Maybe it does. Taken kind of sounds past tense to me. It could be a 5/6, I guess. Obviously garbage. If you play this on turn 20, maybe it's a 5/21. Still garbage. Doesn't even have taunt, man. If it had taunt, like, yeah, maybe. If it's 3 mana, yeah, maybe I'd be a little more intrigued, right? Like, there's some things that could happen, but at 5 mana, dude, this is just bad, right? Like, there is no world. If you're going to turn 20, this is not the card you want. You got other things doing, you got a lot going on by turn 20. You don't want to be playing a 5/20, especially without taunt. I mean, it's kind of funny with, I want to go in a Shaman Shutterblock deck to turn 40 and play this or whatever, but it's clearly not good. Even if you could flip the stats or something, just not good stuff, man. I think a really tough card. So next up here is the Wizened Truthseeker. This is a 4 mana, 4/5 Draenei, which it's kind of nice to see some Draenei. I feel like we didn't see much since they came out. Battlecry set the cost of every card in both players' hands back to their original cost. Now, this might just be a preemptive way to tackle problems like Divergence. We saw that Warlock card that's like cutting costs in half. It's like splitting the card in 2. I think this works against that. It should probably, right? It seems like they're probably printing this as a consideration there. My question though is how this works with stuff where the like card text is like constantly updating it. In other words, if we look at like Ceaseless Expanse, right? Ceaseless Expanse, like it gets discounted throughout the course of the game. And then, theoretically this would set it back to 125 mana, but then the card text is still active in hand. So doesn't this still just immediately re-update itself back? You know what I mean? Like, set is a word that kind of sounds like it's making it, permanent change, but the card text still exists and should still be updating in real time, especially like as soon as a new card is played. Maybe it just resets it to 125 though and it starts over, right? Like maybe it starts over, but I don't know. Like the way this works, like, it works while it's in deck and stuff. It's not like the card text has to be visible in hand or anything for it to update. So I almost feel like it's referencing some, off-site number that's going up over time. And then as soon as it checks that number again, it's going to go right back to where it was. So I don't know. Maybe you guys will have a higher insight here on this. But, for a lot of things like Ceaseless and some Giants and stuff, this might not do anything. This might be more about cards that have specifically, actively set a new cost in hand. Like reduce the cost of cards in hand by 1. And then Truthseeker comes in and it's like, no. Not doing that. They're going back up to their original cost, so like a Shadow Step, if they keep it in hand, discount it or something, Truthseeker's like, no, you're going to pay the full price for that. You're not going to get to Shadow Step that for -2 or whatever. That's my expectation for this. Now, honestly, either way it works. I still don't really know if people are going to make room for this kind of card. Just from like a timing standpoint, a lot of the times things are like played right when they're discounted. I guess, Ceaseless not a good example, but Shadow Step is an example, for instance. Like often it's like played right away, or you're discounting it in order to play it right away, and it's like hard to find a moment necessarily where you just slam this and hope that it works really, really well, just from a timing standpoint. And then ultimately you're also just making a bad play in every other scenario. You're running a card that's dead in hand so often. And, it just can't just sit there. And how big is its impact? You've kind of sacrificed 4 mana to maybe punish the opponent's mana a little bit, right? Or if you're using this as protection for your own cost because the opponent's running Lotheb or whatever to increase your cost. Well, again, you've spent 4 mana to kind of save some mana, which again, it just doesn't seem worth it for only a 4/5 in this case. So I don't know. I think, this is kind of a tech card of sorts that's, a really hard one to squeeze in. Doesn't really seem all that powerful. Seems hard to use effectively. So yeah, I guess I'm just not in love with the Wizened Truthseeker. Maybe a little better if it does work against stuff like Ceaseless, but still a really hard card to run in your deck. Moving on, we've got the Sentient Hourglass, a new 6-mana 4/9 elemental with Rush. After this minion survives damage, swap its stats. So you play a 6-mana 4/9, you trade into a 4/4, and you've got a 6-mana 5/4 left behind. I mean, I think probably an okay arena style card, right? But just not something decks are going to make an excuse for in standard. Even elemental decks tend to run a little faster than something like a 6-drop here that's kind of just taking a value trade and leaving behind a mediocre body. I think by turn 6, that's just not competitive or good enough. So unfortunately here, I think a pretty bad card. Next up is the Whelp of the Infinite. This is a 3-mana 1/4 dragon with Poisonous and Reborn, which honestly is kind of an interesting combination here. This 4 health is pretty sticky and annoying. When you slam this on turn 3, a lot of the times there's going to be like some 3 attack stuff where this is going to take a hit or 2. Which is already like, could this 2-for-1 off the bat just as a 1/4 poisonous, right? And then you've also got that Reborn coming back where this has a chance to kind of 3-for-1 on a single card when it comes to like onboard trades, which is intriguing, right? This kind of has that like Blob of Tar vibe, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm just going to play this and it's going to be this sticky, annoying onboard presence and stuff that's just hard to deal with stuff on board. But in that same comparison, right, like Blob of Tar has taunt and this doesn't. And the taunt on Blob of Tar is what I think makes it particularly effective, right? It's just so much friction, so many bodies, even the little 1/2 taunt that's left behind, right? Like that is still like friction and awkward for the poisonous that's left behind. 2 health is a big difference over 1 on the Reborn side of it, and on the poison side of it, doesn't die to like ping style effects or 1/1s as easily. So, I don't hate this. I think for, just kind of a neutral pile of keywords here, this is better than average, but I do think it falls way behind cards like Blob of Tar and, maybe Dragon decks could squeeze this in as opposed to like Blob of Tar, which might fit better in an elemental or more general or defense package or whatever, but it's still going to be really hard for a card like this to actually make the cut. So I think it's okay for a neutral, but still doesn't quite get there most of the time. The other side of the equation here is Whelp of the Bronze. This is a 3-mana 4/1 dragon with Lifesteal and Divine Shield, which, Lifesteal's cool. This could definitely be a card that heals 8, but when you want to play this on turn 3, you generally haven't taken that much damage yet. So is the kind of sticky body on this worth it? By the way, man, we used to have a 3-mana 3/1 with Divine Shield that was kind of decent in Zoo decks back in the day. Now we have a 3-mana 4/1 Divine Shield that's also a dragon and also has Lifesteal, and now it seems kind of weak. It's crazy how far we've come. It's 11 years. It's to be expected. That's not a criticism, just an interesting observation. So yeah, I just don't think this is going to be worth it, right? Again, like it's a fine kind of tempo play for a more aggressively minded deck. Maybe some Divine Shield synergies out there exist to give this little boost. We've seen some Divine Shield stuff in Paladin. The Dragon tag obviously has an angle too, but at the end of the day, again, I think probably just a little too easy to clean up. Effectively kind of 2 health here. That's a couple pings, a lot of 1/1s, a lot of little ping damage all the time in Hearthstone. Makes this one really hard to connect and be reliable enough. So unfortunately, still also pretty weak. And that wraps it up here for this batch of neutral cards today. So now let's go ahead and rate all of these from 1 to 5 stars. Murazond Unbounded is a 3-star card. Chrono Lord Dios is a 2-star card. Chromie is a 2-star card. Sandmaw is a 2-star card. Clockwork Rager is a 1-star card. Wizened Truthseeker is a 2-star card. Sentient Hourglass is a 1-star card. Whelp of the Infinite is a 3-star card. Whelp of the Bronze is a 2-star card. And there you go. Yeah, I guess that was all 3 stars or less, huh? I was pretty hyped about the first batch of cards. I thought we had some pretty good, strong, solid stuff. This batch of neutrals, not quite as compelling to me. I tried my best to find some angles for these, but I just don't think they're going to make the cut. just a little tough for a lot of these to find a home. So, you know, that can be the case with neutrals. Sometimes we usually have 1 or 2 standout neutrals. Maybe Blizzard's been a little hesitant to print powerful neutrals because of the whole neutral pile of stuff currently succeeding so much in Hearthstone with the Ysera and all that Fire Axe stuff, particularly because these are like dragons in some cases too. But, you know, it's the interesting cards nonetheless, right? Like really big effects, maybe some broken stuff, really exciting effects, even if not competitive. I'm not sure we want cards like Murazond Unbounded to be competitive, right? It might be kind of scary if this was crazy good. So not an indictment on the set necessarily or anything right now, just not the strongest set of cards. That can definitely happen with the neutral stuff. So anyway, share your thoughts on these all down below. Thanks so much as always for watching. Stay tuned for a lot more reviews in the very near future. And until next time, game on.